God is gathering a people. He is fishing for fishers of men. But he does not cast his net in one small corner of the sea. Isaiah foretold, "He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four quarters of the earth." The Lord is connecting his children all over the globe. He calls a remnant to share his light across the earth. Again, Isaiah wrote, "Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn." God gathers his people with a purpose. This community of faith, drawn from every country, language, and people group, has been given a great commission. Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people. The Creator's gathering has carried the message far and wide across the planet. Yet, there is still work to be done. We are living ink on the pages of the greatest story ever told. The recent chapters tell of last-day believers commissioned to go into all the world. At first, our circle of outreach was small, but over time, the vision of a worldwide mission expanded. Even now, the message of Christ's soon return is stretching out to new places. How did it all begin? How will we adapt and grow before the story finds its end? Where do we stand right now? The Seventh-day Adventist Church was born as a direct fulfillment of prophecy. It did not see itself as a denomination, but as a movement with a mission. In fact, it resisted organizational structure and restraint. The leaders and members believed in the soon return of Christ. They used every means necessary to spread the news of the imminent return of Jesus. A lot of people had gotten so excited that they abandoned their businesses. They left fields and crops untended and unharvested. New England winters require preparation, and that preparation simply hadn't been done. People thought they were going to heaven in October. Instead, they wouldn't have food to eat or money for several months. Disappointment might not be a strong enough word. In the words of one Millerite, true believers had given up all for Christ, but he did not come. And now to turn again to the cares, perplexities, and dangers of life, in full view of jeering and reviling unbelievers who scoffed as never before, was a terrible trial of faith and patience. A Methodist paper called for thunderbolts red with uncommon wrath upon the head of Joshua Himes and other Millerites. Critics accused him of being a liar, a fearmongerer, disturber of the peace, and a cheat. Some said Himes fled the country. Some said he committed suicide. The Boston Post called the Advent leaders unprincipled men, perfectly conscious of the absurdity of their opinions and reckless of the injury they caused. In reality, Himes, Miller, and other leaders of the movement had never instructed believers to leave their jobs, sell their property, and neglect their secular responsibilities. But their faith turned them into social pariahs. William Miller himself wrote, "It passed. And the next day it seemed as though all the demons from the bottomless pit were loose upon us." Hiram Edson lamented, "Has the Bible proved a failure? Is there no God, no heaven, no golden home city, no paradise? Is all this but a cunningly devised fable? Is there no reality to our fondest hope and expectation of these things?" Luther Beutel said, "Everyone felt lonely, with hardly a desire to speak to anyone. All were silent, save to inquire, 'Where are we?' and 'What's next?' All were housed in searching their Bibles to learn what to do." Then, Hiram Edson receives a vision while walking through a field. Reinterpretation offers new hope. Early church founders want to share that hope with the believers they had lost. Ellen Harmon White is shown in a vision that James White should start a magazine. Penniless but inspired, James convinces a publisher to print 1,000 copies of The Present Truth. The magazine helps clarify what happened in 1844, and the full cost is repaid by generous readers. Publishing ministry quickly becomes central to spreading emerging Adventist doctrines like the Three Angels' Message and Sabbath Truth. To keep printers from running on the Sabbath, the church starts its own publishing house, which was literally a house that early church members lived and worked in together. Hiram Edson sold his farm and donated the money to buy a hand press. Soon the church began distributing the Second Advent Review and Sabbath Herald. Since there was no paper cutter, Uriah Smith trimmed all the edges of the magazines with his penknife. In his own words, "We blistered our hands in the operation, and often the tracks and form were not half so true and square as the doctrines they taught." At age 23, Smith would go on to serve as editor and would hold the position in some capacity for his entire life. As the publishing ministry grows, young Canadian immigrant George King comes up with the idea to sell subscriptions of Adventist publications. Signs of the Times is born. The gospel message spills out of the church and meets people right at their front door. The beginning of the Seventh-day Adventist Church was exciting. Was it something the pioneers could keep secret? Not a chance. Church pioneers assumed that those who renewed their belief would share it with their brothers and sisters. The brothers and sisters would share with their cousins, and the cousins would share with their brothers and sisters, and the whole Great Commission would fulfill itself. But it didn't work out that way. I realize words like rogue and missionary don't seem like they should go together. But Michael Chikowski was like Indiana Jones or Han Solo. He was, and I quote, "a stubborn, impetuous man who refused to take advice from Ellen White." History gives us the sense that he was a charismatic swindler. Yet, without him, many Adventists would have gone on believing what the Review and Herald printed in 1869. Quote, "It may not be necessary to preach the gospel in any country besides our own, since our land is composed of people from almost every nation." End quote. If we reach the immigrants within the U.S., they'll witness to their friends and families overseas. The Great Commission will fulfill itself. The church's first big push for foreign missions came in 1871, when GC delegates voted to send J.G. Matson to witness to the Scandinavians and Danes of Wisconsin. Chikowski, however, was no Millerite. He was an ex-Catholic Polish priest turned obsessive Sabbatarian. He was young, idealistic, fluent in 7 or 8 languages, and terrible with money. James and Ellen White were so besotted by his personality that they helped him pay all his debts and funded his travel from Battle Creek back to New York. Later, Ellen would receive a vision telling her to stop supporting him. Chikowski left a wake of burnt bridges and bad business deals behind him. Though he hated taking advice, he didn't mind taking money. So when the SDA Church wouldn't support him as a missionary to Europe, he found another denomination that would. Chikowski used their money to share Adventist beliefs in Switzerland. However, he failed to inform the Swiss congregation of the home church in America. It wasn't until a church elder found a copy of the Review and Herald that Chikowski's secret came out. The congregation was shocked. Naturally, their trust was bruised. The Swiss leaders wrote to the GC asking for a replacement missionary. Adventist historian David Trim writes, "Adventists in America were actually sort of embarrassed to learn that there were already Adventist believers in Europe." The Americans invited the Swiss Adventists to send a delegate to the 1869 GC session. Though he arrived too late for the session, he stayed long enough to return as an ordained minister. Elsewhere, Chikowski's tactics finally caught up to him. His bankroll was revoked. Disgraced, he left his family and moved to Hungary, where he would later die at 57, reportedly from exhaustion. But the Swiss church still sought a missionary, and that is how John Nevins Andrews became the first official Seventh-day Adventist missionary to Europe, as a replacement for the rogue missionary. the spirit of spreading the three angels message began to intensify within the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Even J.G. Mattson got to move on from the wilds of Wisconsin to his home country of Denmark. His work would lead to the first International Adventist Conference, the Scandinavian Publishing House, and Mattson Institute in Meissen, Norway. The American Adventist Church was beginning to catch a glimpse of the possibilities. The gospel preached to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. A world church. But we still lacked a key component. Lycopodium powder is hydrophobic, meaning it doesn't mix with water at all. You can cover the surface of a bucket of water with this stuff, dunk your hand inside, and it will come out completely dry. But the most common use for lycopodium powder is in fireworks and explosives. Yet, you can't ignite a pile of it like gunpowder. You can't zap it with an electric charge. Magicians and Hollywood special effects people use it all the time because lycopodium powder is completely inert until you add one ingredient: air. Toss a handful up and air gets between the molecules just like stacking logs for a campfire. Suddenly, all that potential gets stirred up and you've got more than a spark. You've got a fireball. All you need is a gust of wind. William Ambrose Spicer wasn't born Seventh-day Adventist, but he converted around 14 years old after attending revival meetings and reading The Great Controversy. When he was only 16, he had to drop out of high school to care for his father, who had recently endured a stroke. Spicer needed a job, and he found one at the Battle Creek Sanitarium. Young William worked all day and took secretarial courses by night. At 22, he moved to England when former conference president Stephen Haskell offered him a job. Haskell was a missionary to England. But interestingly, England was sending navies, merchants, scientists, and others to the far reaches of Africa and India. Around the world, Western colonialism was spreading. Powerful countries were driven by economic and political gain, ethnocentric beliefs about race superiority, and the thrill of exploration. The motivation to colonize distant lands even got mixed up with religion. And though the reasons for missions were muddied by some, it's undeniable that colonialism helped lay the groundwork for honest, Christ-centered missionaries to reach out in love. At this point, Seventh-day Adventist missions was like a base jumper at the edge of a precipice. So much potential. Ready at any second. Like a toddler learning to walk. Like a handful of lycopodium powder sitting next to a candle, waiting to get shaken up. Primed to ignite. And William Spicer was the breeze to do it. The Spicer wind began to blow in 1892 when he was named secretary of the newly minted Foreign Missions Board. Only 1 year later, an African prime minister donated 12,000 acres of farmland to the Adventist Church. This allowed Spicer to establish the Salusi Mission in Zimbabwe, the first of hundreds of African missions. In 1898, Spicer received 2 notices. The first calls for a missionary to Africa, the second to India. After prayer and a family meeting, Spicer accepts the call to India. He becomes a missionary and editor of the first American periodical in India, Oriental Watchman. But Spicer didn't erupt into a gale force until after he returned to the United States several years later. He would serve A.G. Daniels as secretary during Daniels' term as conference president. And then Daniels would return the favor when Spicer became president. Together, these two led the church for the first 30 years of the 20th century. And they would do for Adventist missions what Henry Ford did for the automobile industry. Ford was visiting a meat-packing plant when he realized that all the workers stood still while the product came to them. Why not do the same for cars? Suddenly, the industrial assembly line was born. Infrastructure. Groundwork. Around the turn of the century, it became clear that the church's top-down style of government was failing. While appropriate to a small, localized church, this method ceased to be effective as the church stretched across continents and oceans. A.G. Daniels suggested union conferences, handing the responsibilities to locals on the ground, familiar with the specific needs of that region. During the reign of Western imperialism, leaders like Teddy Roosevelt employed battleship diplomacy. In the midst of a nonviolent conflict, one country's naval fleet would show up on the other's shores, posturing all its power. This showmanship was usually enough to resolve the issue in favor of the team with the biggest guns. This mindset infected foreign missions too, and Spicer knew it. He raised the issue of American nationalism, saying, "It does one no good to take along from America a national feeling into the field." Missionaries had too often erected a barrier between himself and every soul who is not an American. William Spicer wrote at least 8 books and never owned a car. He always traveled coach on trains, and he wouldn't buy anything he couldn't pay for in cash. Our Adventist college in India is named for him. Before Spicer in 1880, the church had 8 overseas missions. In 1890, still only 8, but by 1900 there were 42. Then 87 in 1910, 153 in 1920, and in 1930, 270 missions in over 50 countries. That's 3 Adventist foreign missionaries for every 1 employed stateside. Spicer stirred the air and the lycopodium powder exploded into flames. The church's membership was growing as numerous as the stars. The first thing you think of when I say NASA is probably the moon landing. It was truly incredible. Only 12 people in history have ever bounced across the lunar surface. But as impressive as that is, NASA has its sights set on loftier goals: Mars. And if putting a human on the moon was hard, putting one on Mars is crazy. The history of reaching the red planet reads something like this. Spacecraft did not reach Earth orbit. Spacecraft's radio failed. Spacecraft at the top of the rocket failed to jettison. Orbiter failed during launch. Orbiter flew past the planet. Lander failed due to fast impact. Flyby module and lander arrived, but lander missed the planet. Is this picture clear? Just getting to Mars is problematic. Earth and Mars orbit the Sun at different speeds. That means the 2 planets are constantly drifting apart or getting closer together. If they launch when Mars is close, the trip could take as little as 6 months. If they launch when Mars is furthest away, add a year to the travel time. And if they miss, it's not like they can set up another rocket to try again right away. The cycle between launch opportunities is close to a year and a half. The journey itself is arduous. The living space is cramped. Bathing with water is impossible. Showers happen with moist towelettes. All food must be canned or freeze-dried. Microgravity deteriorates muscle and bone. And if a solar storm hits, astronauts must retreat to even tinier protected areas of the craft. Assuming launch, flight, and landing are successful, all Mars astronauts will also become farmers on a freezing, oxygenless planet. They will plant, cultivate, harvest, cook, and compost indoors to have food rations. They must continue a self-sustaining existence for somewhere in the ballpark of 2.5 years. That's the minimum amount of time they'll spend all alone, removed from their friends and family before they can come back. And why? Because they believe it's important. Important enough to take the risk, to make the sacrifice. When I say steamship, you probably think of the Titanic. And you are either thinking of a very terrible tragedy or a very long movie. Either way, passengers tell us that the only thing worse than swimming for your life from a sinking steamship is having to live on board one. On Christmas Eve 1901, Jacob Nelson Anderson led the first 3 commissioned Adventist missionaries to China. With their 4-year-old son, Stanley, they left their home in Wisconsin and traveled by train to San Francisco. From there, they boarded a steamship bound for Hong Kong. This was 10 years before anyone would dare to claim a steamship could be unsinkable. At the time, everyone carried living memory of tragedies like the Independence, which crashed into a reef off the northern California coast, losing 150 passengers and crew. If our missionaries traveled in the steerage deck, then they were packed in like cattle with the cargo. When the miserable food was dealt out of huge kettles into dinner pails, the strong would shove and bully. 200 to 400 people might sleep in the same room on bunks. Privacy was impossible. Available restrooms often equated to pots and pans. Unsanitary conditions frequently led to death. Did you catch that? Just being on a steamship could kill you. No icebergs necessary. And the trip takes a minimum of 3 weeks. Upon arrival, J.N. Anderson's escort failed to meet the missionary team. Stranded and exhausted, they immediately realized yet another challenge: communication. Mandarin doesn't use the Western alphabet, but unique characters for every word. Its grammar doesn't come from verb tenses, but from tonal inflection. Standing there with bags in hand, our missionaries probably felt a lot like astronauts setting foot on Mars. But they believed the work was important enough to take the risk, to make the sacrifice. J.N. Anderson's diary records him as a man with a rich heart for the land and its people. He and the others were committed. The first task was to learn the language. It took 2 years. The next task was getting from Hong Kong to mainland China. This only proved possible because of the efforts of other missionaries, both official and unofficial. J.N. Anderson met his neighbors, shopped at local markets, and shared his faith. On Valentine's Day, 1903, Anderson baptized 6 Chinese converts to Adventism. That's how the church started in China. 6 people. Anderson's appeals to the General Conference scored 4 doctors and 2 nurses, the beginning of Adventist medical missionary work in China. A Chinese church headquarters were established. Anderson's sister-in-law formed the first Adventist school. Anderson's younger brother was so inspired that he made the steamship journey out and joined the efforts. In the spring of 1906, J.N. Anderson passed the torch to Nga Pit Ke, ordaining him as the first Chinese minister in the SDA Church. This one action opened the door for dozens of other Chinese church members to join in, spreading the good news. Today, in China, there are over 400,000 Adventist believers in 4,571 congregations. Over 40,000 kilometers around, 24,901 miles in circumference. The Earth is big. And you want to send a message. What do? A long, long time ago, the options were limited. You might have sent up smoke signals, blown a ram's horn, built a fire beacon, or sounded the drums. With the written word, hand-delivered mail became an option. Later, carrier pigeons became popular. In the 15th century, sailors started using maritime flag semaphores. In the 18th century, optical telegraph. Then the electric telegraph, signal lamps, and acoustic phonograph. Finally, in 1876, the telephone was invented. In a few years, wireless telegraphy and radio would follow. Television hit in 1927, and as early as 1946, there were limited-capacity mobile phones in cars. Transatlantic telephone cable followed, then commercial satellites and fiber optics. By 1969, computers were networking with each other. Ship-to-shore satellite communications gave way to the first cellular phone network, and finally, the Internet. Now, if you want to send a message to the other side of the planet, you can email, text, call, Skype, FaceTime, or voice over IP telephone if you want. 40,000 kilometers around, the world is very small. Ellen White had this to say: "The vineyard includes the whole world, and every part of it is to be worked. The whole earth is to be illuminated with the glory of God's truth. The light is to shine to all lands and all peoples. Our burden for the regions beyond can never be laid down until the whole earth shall be lightened with the glory of the Lord." Was the church up to that kind of challenge? Buckle up for a high-speed history lesson. The first half of the 20th century was filled with firsts for the Adventist church. The first church in Bangladesh, church in Indonesia, missionaries in Malaysia, tent meetings in Palestine, church in the Bahamas, church in Ecuador, evangelistic meeting in Jordan, indigenous church in Egypt, mission on the island of Guadeloupe, converts in Puerto Rico, school in Hawaii, converts in Iran, training school in India, Adventists enter Sicily, church in Dominican Republic, academy in the Philippines, missionary school in Finland, Brazilian minister ordained, teachers institute in China, public meetings in Cambodia, church in Colombia, convert baptisms and church in Iraq, mission in Burundi, clinic in Malaysia, missionaries arrive in Liberia, mission among Guatemalan Indians, church on island of Martinique, church in Cameroon, evangelism in Guam and Micronesia, baptisms in Madeira Island, radio evangelism in Argentina and Cuba, missionary to Cape Verde, sanitarium in Korea, post-secondary school in Lebanon, house-to-house evangelism in French Guinea, radio evangelism in Brazil, summer camp in Puerto Rico, school in Ethiopia, church in Taipei, Taiwan, television broadcast of Faith for Today. At the turn of the 20th century, the church was operating foreign missions like smoke signals and carrier pigeons. But then, the countries that had received missionaries started sending out missionaries on their own. And then they sent out missionaries on their own. It's a small world after all. Between the end of 1910 and the end of 1950, over 650,000 new Adventists joined the World Church. And that's not all. We skimmed over one of the best parts of the story. Things got really exciting right around the start of the Great Depression. Wireless telegraphy, also known as radio. The history of this innovation feels like a soap opera. Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla were rival inventors. Radios still rely on a Tesla coil component today. But just as Tesla was preparing to unveil a wireless transmitter that could carry a signal 50 miles, his workshop burned to the ground. Edison was known for using hired thugs and even the mafia. But the cause was most likely an electrical problem. With Tesla's work literally up in smoke, Guglielmo Marconi swoops in and manages to send the first transatlantic signal. His patent is later denied because the design relied on Tesla's work. Then the ruling was overturned in favor of Marconi when Andrew Carnegie and, you guessed it, Thomas Edison stepped in with marketing and money. In 1943, much later on, Marconi's patent was reversed again and posthumously awarded to Tesla. Getting radio to work at all was an endeavor filled with drama, but the effects on communication, culture, and society were even more dramatic. In 1905, the Japanese Navy obliterated a Russian fleet at the Battle of Tsushima, in part because they had purchased radio equipment from Marconi. Radio distress signals saved the lives of over 700 Titanic passengers, and subsequently, it became law for every vessel to have a wireless operator listening 24/7. People likened radio to newspapers, which was helpful in determining content, but there were several powerful distinctions. You don't need to be literate to listen to radio. You also don't need to make extra time because listening, as opposed to reading, can be a passive experience. You can listen to the radio while you work on other things. The radio was like cultural glue, uniting different classes and backgrounds under the banner of immediate information. The voice of the man on the street was heard alongside the voice of Orson Welles' War of the Worlds and alongside President Franklin D. Roosevelt's fireside chats. No president had ever spoken directly and simultaneously to the American people before. Politicians suddenly needed to become great orators. Propaganda was easily fed to the masses. There was another notable figure tied to the origins of radio. The same year Tesla's workshop went up in flames, Harold Marshall Sylvester Richards was born. When Marconi sent the first transatlantic signal, HMS Richards was 7. When his first live sermon was broadcast, Richards and radio were basically the same age. In 1929, HMS Richards' ministry took root in Los Angeles, California. After advertising one of the massive evangelistic crusades on the radio, the station offered him a daily spot for a family worship program. Richards was convinced evangelism must utilize the radio. But conference headquarters thought differently.
Radio is so new it's never been done before, and besides, it's the devil's tool. After all, alcohol is advertised over the radio, and so are cigarettes. The devil's tool, that's what it is.
While the conference remained unconvinced, Richards grew more obsessed. Finally, a friend confronted him.
Harold, you still haven't done anything about radio. Do you believe in it? I know God wants me to do this. He won't leave me alone about it. Do you really believe God wants you on the radio? Yes, I do. I know He wants me on the radio. No, you don't. You don't believe in any such thing. What do you mean? I do believe it. I really do. Well, if God wants you on the radio and you believe that's where He wants you, why aren't you on the radio?
The weight of his own fear and unbelief hit Richards like a ton of bricks. The very next night, when he stood at the door to collect offering, he told the congregation that his left coat pocket would be the radio pocket. If they believed in the ministry's potential, they could donate. In the middle of the Great Depression, HMS Richards' local congregation gave $220. That equates to over $3,000 in 2015. They gave it in cash, gold jewelry, and even teeth. Night after night, the money for airtime filled the radio pocket. While most radio preachers only preached, Richards worked with a producer and musicians to create a professional, polished program called The Tabernacle of the Air. Once-a-week broadcasts became daily broadcasts. Letters poured in with questions, prayer requests, and cash. Programming expanded. Lone Star 4, an all-male quartet, became a staple on the show. Evening meetings were recorded and sent out as far as the Atlantic coast, Alaska, New Zealand, and Australia. This went on for 7 years with no support from the conference. Finally, in 1937, the Union Conference decided to unite with ongoing ministry and actually convinced HMS Richards to move into radio full-time. From then on, the voice of prophecy was transmitted over the airwaves twice a week, coast to coast, by 89 different radio stations. After a renaming contest, the Lone Star 4 became the King's Heralds. Richards became a recognized radio authority. The Oregon Conference sent Julius L. Tucker to learn everything he could from Richards. Eventually, Tucker would learn enough to found his own program, The Quiet Hour. Today, because of HMS Richards, the voice of prophecy can be heard in nearly 36 languages. Bible lessons are available in over 70 languages. Adventist World Radio broadcasts in 80 languages and estimates that they are able to reach an astounding 2/3 of the world's total population. Embracing new tools and innovation brought Seventh-day Adventist missions into the modern world, and radio was just a first step in another 50 years of growth. Between 1950 and the 1990s, several monumental world events took place. Not the least among them is you. Yes, the majority of you right here were probably born during the auspicious epoch known as the latter half of the 20th century. You lived through some low points and some high points. So has the earth. So has the church. You may remember when Pathfinders became a globally recognized church ministry. It was the same year that the Korean War began in 1950, and it was just a year later, 1951, when Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay summited Mount Everest. Stunning feats of human endurance for New Zealand and Nepal. And the same year, the U.S. rolled out color television. In 1955, the Vietnam War began, and a year later, 1956, the first Adventist church was established in Cyprus. Later, Dr. Roy S. Cornell opened a hospital in Benghazi, Libya. It Is Written became the first Christian TV program to be broadcast in color, and the General Conference voted for a 6-week cross-cultural missionary training program. This would become the Institute of World Missions. While the Russians were busy launching Sputnik, 1957, Malta got its first literature evangelists. Then, in 1958, the Maltese government granted a 3-month annual book-selling campaign. As Hawaii and Alaska joined the United States and Castro took over Cuba, an Adventist evangelistic center opened in Beirut. They've done everything there from Bible correspondence classes to running a physical therapy clinic. Remember the Benghazi, Libya hospital? The same year Alan Shepard became the first American in space, 17 of the hospital staff organized a church. The following year, the Berlin Wall went up. Later, when Benghazi Hospital was nationalized, nearly all Adventists would depart Libya. Pastor Joe Cruz started a radio program in 1965 where he would open every show with an amazing fact. He creatively named the broadcast Amazing Facts and followed up each nugget of trivia with a simple biblical lesson. Throughout the 1960s, religious restrictions were relaxed in Kazakhstan. Perhaps Kazakhstan, like a lot of the world, was beginning to care less about religion in general. Whatever the case, Adventists were able to form new congregations, construct church buildings, and hold public worship. While Apollo 11 astronauts strolled across the moon, the Adventist Youth World Congress met in Zurich, Switzerland. The same year, John Freeman founded Maranatha Flights International in an effort to organize short-term mission trips to lay people. 20 years later, they'd merge with Volunteers International to become Maranatha Volunteers International. In 1971, the artist Jasper Johns would be credited with starting postmodernism in art. Adventist Health Systems broke ground 2 years later and would become one of the most robust hospital systems in the U.S. In 1979, despite having no faculty or campus of their own, the Latin American Theological Seminary was established in Brazil, offering degrees throughout South America. Mark and Annie Scalzi, along with their 2 kids, became the first missionary family to operate under the newly incorporated Adventist Frontier Missions. They planted a church in the Philippines. It Is Written made history with the most massive satellite TV evangelistic series of all time. Net 95, 96, and 98 won an estimated 25 to 30,000 new converts. The once closed country of Mongolia established its first SDA church less than 20 years ago. And despite the recent decline, 1999 saw the worldwide enrollment in Adventist schools surpass 1 million students. From the 50s up through the turn of the millennium, the global Seventh-day Adventist Church said yes. We said yes to bold ideas, yes to innovative tools, yes to passionate ministries that grew our church all over the planet. We are not referring to growth in the thousands, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands. We are a church in the millions. 232 countries with 78,810 churches and 18,479,257 members. We are like sands of the desert, the stars of the night sky. We are an ocean. So where does that leave you? The biggest cities in the world have a population over 1 million. Nearly half of those cities fall within the 1040 window. 60% of Earth's humanity lives inside a rectangle between the latitude lines of 10 and 40 degrees. Out of the 3.4 billion people in the 1040 window, 1% know Jesus. Less than 1/1000% are Seventh-day Adventist. In the middle of the East-North Africa region, there's one Adventist for every 65,000 people. There is one country that was evangelized as early as the 16th century. Portuguese Catholics converted huge numbers of indigenous people. But then, the natives grew weary of Portugal's growing power, their intolerance for other belief systems, and their involvement in the slave trade. Today, roughly 1% in the country's populace remains Christian, making it one of the least evangelized nations on the planet. Some suggest that consumerism and individualism are to blame. Others claim that this nation's postmodern worldview is simply at odds with Christianity. The postmodern worldview says truth is relative. A Christian who declares one God, one truth, and one way to heaven looks like a fool here. Does this description sound familiar? The statistics are for Japan, but the explanation could be true for numerous countries like Turkey, Netherlands, Sweden. And the 1040 window isn't the only place with bleak statistics. There is another country where only 7.5% of adults attend church. Over the past 20 years, church closures have risen to 6 per week. England has been called the most godless country in all of Europe. In the United States, the numbers of people who self-identify as Christians has dropped 1% every year for the last 8 years. While about 70% claim Christianity, only 37% report going to church. Meanwhile, non-Christian religions are on the rise. Additionally, from 1990 to the present, the number of Americans who call themselves atheist, agnostic, or of no religious affiliation soared from 8% to almost a quarter of the nation, 16.1% around the 2007 midpoint. In the first century church, the Apostle Paul acted as a missionary to the Gentiles. A map of his travels proves that while undoubtedly very slow, Paul covered a lot of territory throughout the Mediterranean. While Italy and Greece carry lasting Christian legacies, Paul's work was geographically centered just a bit further east. 100 years ago, 20% of Turkey's population was Christian. Today, the 20% of Christians in Turkey have been reduced to 0.2%. Paul had the disadvantage of traveling entirely by boat or on foot. We have no such excuse. At the end of 2013, there are only 109 registered members in Turkey's 2 Adventist churches. The population of Turkey is approximately 75 million, even in countries where we are the strongest. Where we brag that 1 in 10 people in that country are Adventist, that is not success. That means that 90% of the people in that country have not been reached with the 3 angels' message. Perhaps it's time to examine this challenge from a new angle. You, the living, breathing body of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, have in your DNA a rich heritage. You have adapted, you have adjusted, you have carried the mission. But our world is changing, and the majority of the world's population has poured out of rural regions into urban centers. This has created megacities with populations in the millions, and it's changed the DNA of how we fulfill our mission. Our traditional methods to reach the masses have lost efficacy. Like our pioneers, it's time that we adapt. We are not called to change our message, but our method. Ironically, the new angle we need may be a very old truth. It's not about countries, it's about people. Evangelism can be the natural byproduct of a loving relationship between 2 people. And authentic person-to-person missions can happen anywhere. It doesn't matter if you're called to the 1040 window or the door of your parents' house. Even business people and social media marketers know that the most trusted form of advertisement is word of mouth. People listen to those with whom they have a relationship. So we must build relationships and community with those outside our borders and beliefs, whether those are people of other faiths or no faith, or our very own children. We, the church, can apply this old truth in a new way. Each of the world's divisions has built aggressive strategies. Strategies like Life Hope Centers, Centers of Influence, comprehensive health initiatives, and small groups. With God's help, we can and will reach the masses in these large urban centers.
Over the past 5 years, the Lord has been hard at work. The 13 world divisions set urban evangelism in their region's megacities as the top priority, encouraging pastors, students, residents, and all members of the church to help spread the gospel as a part of the Mission to the Cities global ministry. All of our divisions have been actively pursuing methods, programs, and strategies to reach the vast populations. The East Central African, Euro-Asian, Inter-American, Northern Asia-Pacific, South Pacific, Southern Asia-Pacific, and the Southern Asian divisions have aggressively engaged in the Mission to the Cities initiative. They have created comprehensive health ministries, creative youth outreach, and some have established Life Hope Centers in their urban communities. Some have sent out 1,000 pioneers to unentered areas, while others have created Christian cafes. There have been creative ideas too numerous to mention, but all over the world, God's people are reaching out in unorthodox ways to spread this 3 angels message. The West Central Africa Division has been growing exponentially in the past 5 years. With new conferences and schools being built, they're able to reach more people in their vast communities. They also now have 2 printing presses where books and handouts can be printed in all 4 of the division's main languages, in a massive effort to communicate the gospel. Through their radio and television programs, they are able to reach areas that are unsafe to travel to. In the Trans-European Division, focus was put upon London as a main hub to reach people in need. Free health expos were given in the city, and Londoners were invited to share in live music, healthy food, and education. A special project called the Sabbath Sofa was set up in the city with the intention of allowing people to sit, rest, and learn about the Sabbath. Through the work of God, 700 people were baptized following the evangelistic work done in London. In the Inter-European Division, urban evangelism was done through programs like the Life Hope Center, where pastors and evangelists preached to residents from an old railway car to draw attention. They also created the idea of a box giveaway, where residents would press a button on a large cardboard box in the center of town, and a booklet would be handed to them through a slat. Young evangelists work hard to spread the gospel, distributing literature and working through media evangelism. The Southern Africa Indian Ocean Division has been busy hosting over 2,000 evangelism sites across the major cities within its reach. Division administrators kept urban areas as the main focus, and the payoff has been thousands of baptisms, with the hope of more to come. Bringing over 1,700 volunteers together, the North American Division installed a major health exposition for the San Antonio, Texas residents, offering free and extensive health care, dental care, and eye care. For the first time also, surgeries were offered, including skin cancer removal, vasectomies, and hysterectomies. Haircuts, styling, as well as nutrition and cooking demonstrations were all offered for the benefit of the community. There was even a station for men to have full suits fitted and given away for free. In total, through the grace of God, they served over 6,000 residents. In the South American Division, 2,300 new churches have been built in the past year, all in megacities where residents can easily access the Adventist network. Pastors went through training to begin reaching people in unique ways. One of these was through surfing. A group would come together, surf, and then study with their waterproof Bibles on the beach. We appeal to things that matter to them, like the sea and the waves, and we show them in the Bible that it is God who makes the waves. This effective form of ministering is intensifying interest where there was little before. All throughout the world, our servants of God have been hard at work, bringing the message of salvation to the megacities of their regions. This is how we reach the world. This is how we touch the lives of millions in the name of the Lord, through innovative ministry, through tireless service, and through devoted unity geared towards one single mission: to seek and save the lost.
As we can see from the nations and flags standing here under this dome, God has blessed the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Over 18 million members. Yet the mission field, the world's population, is nearly 7 billion. Even in countries where we have 1 to 7 or 1 to 10 members, that means that 90% have not embraced or maybe even heard of the three angels' message. Paul said before he died, "Not a creature on earth have not heard the good news of Jesus Christ." God has raised up the Seventh-day Adventist Church to take this message to every nation, every kindred, every tongue, and every people. This is our mission. This is our message. This is our calling. We are not just a collection of countries with flags. We are not just a collection of divisions, unions, and conferences. We are one church, one family, with one purpose and one mission. Our mission and our purpose binds us together stronger than nations, stronger than kindreds, and stronger than tongues. Today, with this great mission challenge before us, we can only succeed by the infilling and the indwelling of the Holy Spirit who makes us one. God understands that we cannot do this in our own power and our own strength, and that's why Jesus promised in Acts 1:8, "But you shall receive power after the Holy Ghost has come upon you." He tells us that it is not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. He promises in Joel 2:28, "I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy." The hope that we have is that we will, by the power of God's Spirit, complete the task, fulfill the mission, and the church will be triumphant. The church will be able to say, as Paul said, "Not a creature on earth have not heard the good news of Jesus Christ." I have fought the good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith, and now henceforth is laid upon us a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give us at that day. And not only us, but unto them also that love his appearing. The reward of the church for faithfulness to its mission is that he will come. Matthew 24:14 says, "And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached unto all the world for a witness, and then shall the end come." There is no way we can do it without God's Spirit. I long for that day. I can't wait for Jesus to come. What about you?